Welcome to our second webinar this spring, designed to share professional expertise with members of the Bryant community. Before I turn the program over to our presenter, Diane Wilbur, class of '88, I need to provide you all with a couple of pointers for today's webinar, which will last for approximately 1 hour. All participants are in a listen-only mode. However, we encourage you to comment and ask questions using the question and answer feature located in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Diane will go through her presentation, but feel free to ask questions throughout. And as we find a little break in between the presentation, I can prompt Diane with those questions from the audience. As you can already see, this webinar will utilize a live video feed from our presenter. This video can be resized based on your preference. Simply click and drag the divider located in between the video and the slideshow. I guess I should introduce myself really quick to everyone. My name is Tyler Brum. I'm a 2013 grad from this university. I've been working in the Alumni and Parent Office for a little over 3 years now, managing our online communications to alumni, parents, and friends of Bryant, as well as hosting many of our regional networking programs. If you would like to see where we will be next, simply visit bryant.edu/alumni events. Also, if you have any questions about webinar series or you're interested in hosting one in the future, feel free to email me at tbrum@bryant.edu. So I have the honor of introducing today's presenter, Diane Wilbur. Diane Wilbur is an executive career coach and leadership consultant who is passionate about helping others make a valuable impact within their organizations. For more than 20 years, Diane's focus on talent development has helped hundreds of professionals succeed in the workplace and achieve their personal best. She coaches many alumni with career transitions and teaches leadership topics as an adjunct faculty member at Bryant University. As a highly engaging keynote speaker and classroom facilitator, she shares her personal stories of failures and setbacks that led to her career transformation. She began her career as a CPA and eventually found her strengths were with people, not with numbers. When she took the journey to become a salesperson at Fidelity, she eventually became a top producer and President's Club honoree. Her accomplishments were recognized as she progressed through sales management, earning the Sales Management Excellence Award, and eventually led to her role as Director of Human Resources. Diane provides customized cutting-edge programs on soft skill topics such as personal branding, executive presence, communication skills, and emotional intelligence. Her client list ranges from small businesses to Fortune 500 companies and has had the pleasure of working with many groups, including Fidelity, American Century, Webster Bank, AIG, EMC, Dell, Charles Schwab, ING, Selective Insurance, and TJX Company. And we have the pleasure of having Diane present to us today on the She Factor. You don't need to be a shark to swim. Without further ado, Diane, take it away, and we're excited to have you.
Thanks so much, Tyler. It's so fun to be back here, especially on a day where it's not snowing out in Smithfield, Rhode Island. I am sitting in this beautiful library. When I was here many years ago, we were in the dungeon. So for those of my classmates that are on the call today, they have certainly upgraded the library. But welcome. We have a number of people on the call today from all over the world, as far as Paris, and a number of men too. So, and I think that's timely because when you think about March, it's really the Women's History Month. So I think this topic is particularly timely. And we're just coming off the Women's Summit. I'm a committee member on the Bryant University Women's Summit, and we just had 1,100 amazing women here on campus. And you know, you walk away with this feeling of empowerment and you know, some great ideas. So this feeds into what we're going to talk about today. But before we begin, I do want to mention again that there are a majority of women on the call. There's only a few men. So big shout out and thank you to the men who are joining us. But this is not a women's issue, it's a business issue. And I'll explain that in terms of, you know, how I developed this whole She Factor program. But before I get started, I wanted to share a personal story with you. And it really relates to raising your hand and getting involved. And we're going to go back to 1978. I was 12 years old, and I remember being at Black Rock Elementary School. There was a gentleman who sent out probably a letter back then because there was no email back then, looking for paper boys. So it was the Patuxent Valley Daily Times. I don't even know if they're still in existence, but they came to the elementary school. And I was in 6th grade at the time, and I wanted a job, just like everybody else, wanted to earn some money. And I showed up for the meeting after school that day, and I was the only girl there. And I remember walking into the room, and I remember the principal back then, and he stopped me at the door, and he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm here for the meeting." And he said, "Well, this is for paper boys." And that just shows you like how, how different things are now. First of all, I don't think anyone's really delivering papers. We get most of our news through social media. But when you circle back to in the 1970s, the expectation was that girls didn't do the same thing that boys did. So, for me, that was the first time that I raised my hand and got into a situation where I felt unwelcome. And when you think about it, from the time we're little girls, we're sort of fearless and we throw ourselves into situations. And over time, with this gender bias and other things that prevent us from, being there, it shapes who we are. So just a little backdrop on where we've come and, my thought process in developing this whole program. Because, acting like a man is very outdated in today's world. It doesn't get you where you need to be. And I think you'll see within the next 45 minutes or so, the industry and the world as a whole is really starting to embrace these female attributes that have been so popular. So what is the she factor? You guys are probably all wondering, what is the she factor? We've only got about 45 minutes here with questions. We're not going to go into my whole program, but I will share with you that the basis of this is really based on female attributes and values and how to get ahead, how to find your natural strengths, capitalize them, and try to be the biggest impact that you can, with whether it's at work or in your community or at home. So take a look at what we have here. We have 8 amazing women on the screen. And, most of the things that we hear today in the news focus on the negative. We're still behind in pay. We don't have enough representation in politics or, in leadership roles. And almost everything that you read is focused on the negative. And, one of the things I want to point out here, and it's really the basis of the she factor, is we need to kind of have a mind shift and start focusing more on the positive. And here are 8 women who are considered trailblazers who have paved the way for us in many different ways. We have women that we can celebrate all over the world, whether they're in politics, in media, in business, in nonprofit work. And, we still got a long way to go. We still are behind the 8 ball, but I think that once we start looking at how much we have to celebrate, we'll start to change our mindset. So when you think about mindset, I don't know about you, but I have a shelf full of books on topics that really reinforce what we're doing wrong. And as women, we run out and we buy these books, and we're excited to buy these books, and we embrace it. And you can see here, like the first one, nice girls don't get the corner office, and it's mistakes that we're making. So it's almost inbred in us that we're making these mistakes, and we're somehow handicapped to take on these leadership roles because we're not fitting into a box, into like a model, an expectation. So the bad news is we go out and buy them, and what happens is they love that, the authors love that, so they create new books, and it just is reinforcing this perpetuous model of what we're doing wrong instead of what we're doing right. And for those of you who graduated with me, you can probably identify with this next picture. We are so eager for advice, and we take things to heart. We take these things very seriously, and even back in the 80s, we even dressed like men. And for many of us who haven't purged our closets, we probably still have a couple of suits with these shoulder pads sitting in our closets. I know I just got rid of a few years ago, and they're ridiculous when you think about it. The notion that we can put on a man's suit to be more powerful or have more impact in our business is pretty ridiculous when you think about it, but we all did it, and we're guilty of it. So one of the things that I wanted to start off with was some of the challenges and barriers for women. And Tyler mentioned that you've got the on-screen thing. So I'd love to hear from you. I want you to think about some of the challenges that you're faced with right now in your business, and what are those things? And in the meantime, as we're seeing these things pop up, I'll talk about a few things. First, it's that ultimate fear of failure. I think we're all, whether you're male or female, we're all faced with that fear of failure. But women in particular, we fit into a box. We want to be a perfectionist. There's that good girl syndrome, or You know, some of the times I'm dealing with the imposter syndrome. You know, those are a few of the challenges that I've seen, not only with myself, but with a lot of executives and leaders that I work with. But I want to hear from you, and I'm just wondering if Tyler has gotten anything coming through yet. Yes? No? Okay. All right, you guys probably all are eating your sandwiches and hanging back, but if you think of them, certainly pull them our way. When you think about these challenges, whether it's mom guilt or being a perfectionist or, you know, fear of failure, the biggest one in my book is this one. So this biggest challenge is gender bias, and we still throw around all of these phrases. We're guilty of it. Take a look. Men can't cook. I know my husband is fairly decent at it, but we say this. Women can't drive. Men are better at math. Women tend to be more emotional. They're not strong enough. And you fill in the blank. You throw like a girl, you run like a girl, whatever like a girl. And this is gender bias that we hear over and over that becomes inbred in us. And unfortunately, there's lasting impact with these messages. And whether we're doing it now in 2018 or back in 1978 when I was 12 years old, things haven't really changed that much. And it's a huge challenge because we start to believe these things. And I'll give you a quick example. My son, Jack, he's 16 now. He's been a hockey player all his life. And when he was little, I think he was in 6th grade, we had to go out and buy some button-down shirts. And there was a point in time where they had to start dressing up to go to these hockey games. And as cute as that was, it was pretty much an ordeal putting a kid from jeans into a button-down shirt. So needless to say, I took him shopping, and he picked out a bunch of shirts. One of the shirts he picked out was pink. And he said, "Mom, what do you think of this shirt?" I said, I think it's great. I love pink. And you know, he said, "Well, I think I'm going to get it." And I stopped him. And I said, and this is only a couple of years ago, I said, "Jack," I said, "you know, you're walking into a locker room filled with boys, 12 years old." He was in middle school at the time. You know, they might give you a lot of crap for walking in with a pink shirt. You just want to be aware of that. And he looked at me and he said, "I don't really care what they think of me." He grabbed the shirt and on his way. So I share that as an example because I think this next generation doesn't have the same gender bias that we have, but we have to be conscious that it's out there. They're a lot more confident than we are, and they're less likely to label than we are. But needless to say, a lot of people in leadership positions today still have this, and it's something that we're continuously fighting. And when you think about these labels, they really don't get us anywhere. They just hold us back and prevent us really from getting out of our comfort zone. So the shark theme. You don't need to be a shark to get ahead. And I've got some faces here, and you know, at the bottom, and all the faces down here, all the women down here are powerful women, and they're political women. And I put these here because they've all been in some shape or form held accountable for showing their teeth, showing a dark side, showing an aggressive side, and getting out of their comfort zone. And whatever side you're on for politics doesn't really matter. They're all powerful women, and because they've crossed that line and they've been a little bit more aggressive, they've been held accountable in a negative way, and they've been penalized for really showing their assertiveness. So I want you to think about this because, you know, it impacts them professionally, it impacts them in a personal way, and they've been called names, and you know, it comes under this umbrella that we all are faced with day to day. So I'm going to throw out some words, and I want you to think of these words, and I want you to think to yourself, are you guilty of calling a man these words? Bossy, ditzy, frigid, pushy? How about this one? Hormonal, witchy, or replaced with a B, irrational, abrasive, ambitious, emotional, or frumpy. So think about all those words and think about the faces that you see on the screen. You know, we tend to put women into this box, and those words are not true descriptors of men, and it certainly shouldn't be used for women either, but unfortunately they are. So I want to take you on a little bit of a journey here, because not long ago, women were really discouraged for raising their hands. You know, for me, I was born in the late 60s, so even my mom was put into a box. She was given an opportunity to become one of two things, a teacher or a nurse. My grandmother wasn't given an opportunity to even go to college. And while that may be very unusual for some of the people listening in, a lot of these folks are still in the workforce today. So when you think about that, there are lasting implications. Recently, it was probably 2 years ago, I was looking for a car. And I went down to a dealership in Warwick, and it was a very expensive dealership. And I walked on the lot, and a man approached me, a salesman approached me. And he said, "What are you looking at?" And I pointed to this expensive car. And the first question he had for me was, "What does your husband do for a living?" This was only a couple years ago. And you're probably thinking, wow, I can't believe that happened. Take a look on your screen. Back in 1950, look at the top 5 jobs. We have secretary, bank teller, sales clerk, private household worker, and teacher. Fast forward 60 years later, there's not that much of a difference. Secretary is still the #1 job for women in terms of placement, cashier, elementary school teacher, nurse, and nursing aide. And I'm bringing this to your attention because we have made a tremendous progress in terms of STEM classes and getting women involved in male-dominated industries. But when you look at the research, we still have a lot of women in these jobs. And again, this carries over to what we see in terms of gender bias. So let's get to the good news. The good news is the tide is turning. We're swimming in the right direction. Everything with this Me Too movement, the Never Again movement, everything that's going on around the world has embraced the female empowerment. And I think people are jumping on in droves. I know that I'm getting a lot of calls from companies. I do a lot of programs on women empowerment topics, and that's the good news. That's the good news. I think people are starting to recognize that we're the largest empowering workforce that there is in the near future. In fact, we saw the biggest jump last year in 2017 with the number of CEOs. They jumped over 50% from 21 to 32. And when you think about that, that's huge. Like what took so long to get there? Look at some of the headlines. It's really time to change the narrative. Some of the recent headlines focus on the mystery, the mysterious success, like it was this hidden secret, the best reason to increase women in business leadership. And there's a huge focus now on women-led companies and how that translates to profit and results. So these are recent headlines. I'm sure there are more recent out there, but when you think about it, there's no mystery. There's no silver bullet, but they're putting us in this box like there's some big secret out there and trying to identify where this advantage is. So for me, I'm calling this advantage the she factor. I don't think it's a mystery. I don't think it's a silver bullet. It's just getting more people involved. And all the research shows that the more women you put into the funnel, the better the results are. Take a look at this. With women CEOs, they're driving 3 times the returns as the S&P 500. And if you think that's a fluke, take a look at the next statistic. 80 women CEOs during a 12-year period produced returns in excess of 200% better than the S&P. So that's consistency. And I think when you're adding these female leaders in, we're starting to get recognized not only for translating into better stock values, higher profitability, but even women hedge funds are outperforming their male counterparts. So when you look at the previous slide here, why did this happen? When you question it, it's always been the morally right thing to do to put more women into CEO positions, but it's only been happening because they've been presented with significant, undisputed data that shows the financial results. So sure, it's a morally right thing to do, but it's also showing up in financial results, and that's what's really leading this charge here. So that's great evidence, but if that's not enough for you, and you can see the theme here, you probably are realizing what my favorite show is by now, Shark Tank. The real confirmation comes from our friends and really the best financial source out there, Kevin O'Leary. Many of you know him as Mr. Wonderful, and you know, he's been quoted in a lot of articles. He's invested in a lot of different companies, and he's obviously a self-made billionaire. He invested in 27 different companies, and he has here that there's not one company that he has invested in so far that has outperformed the ones that he has invested in by women. So very, very notable. So from a long-term perspective, you know, there is some research coming out of Harvard University and the Carnegie Foundation that really points to what this long-term success is all about. You may have heard this statistic. 85% of your long-term success is really dependent on what we call human engineering. And only 15 is attributable to technical ability. And when you think about this human engineering, it's really your personality, your interpersonal effectiveness, it's your communication skills, the ability to influence and lead and negotiate. It falls under that soft skill umbrella. So it's all of these things that fall under the 85% that they've determined make us very successful. And again, those are what we call the she advantage. So there are a number of international studies, but I've got one here to share with you from Zenger Folkman. And this really zeroes in on what the top leadership attributes are all about. So these are the top leadership attributes, and you can see just from the columns to the right here that 15 out of 16 attributes are outperformed by women. You know, whether it's taking initiative or developing others, collaboration, being a champion for change, being innovative, we are outperforming men in almost every single category. The only category that we're not, interestingly enough, is at the bottom, which is develop strategic perspective, which is really still lacking in vision. You know, that's disputable for me, but it's very close and, you know, sort of at the margin. But I want to bring this to your attention because this isn't a US based research. It's based all over the world. There were 91 countries that participated in over 21,000 employees. So that's across the board. You know, we're getting recognized for these soft skill leadership attributes and how that's really impacting the bottom line. So many of you have probably seen this quote by Maya Angelou, and but it's true. It really is about how you make people feel. They do forget what you say and what you do. It really comes down to that feeling of connection. And I think for us as women, we've got that advantage here. We've got the technical competence, but we also have what we recognize as these soft skill umbrellas. So we're ahead of the game in terms of many of these attributes. So when you look at the list that we just sort of went through, there are 15 or 16 we could spend time on looking at. But I think for us today, because we're short on time, we only have a certain amount of time. I want to focus in on the 3 top ones. So I see this a lot with women that I coach, and these are natural leadership skills, whether they're showing a high level of empathy, a high level of collaboration and teamwork and getting others involved and getting voices at the table, or a certain percentage of vulnerability. So when you think about these 3 natural leadership skills, these are things that for years we have hidden as women. We have tried to, you know, just put to the side, you know, just try to show up strong. But now, interestingly enough, when you think about what's going on, not only with all the movement, but the results, the financial results, and what companies are looking for in leaders, they're looking for these things, and these are things that come natural for us. They're trying to teach men how to be more empathetic. You know, they're trying to show them how to be sensitive with others and try to respond appropriately, active listening, creating bonds. And it's not easy if it doesn't come natural, but for us, it comes natural. And what does that lead to? It leads to the things that we have here. It's leading to higher engagement, more motivation, retaining your top talent, more customer satisfaction, and ultimately more profitability. So for today, what I wanted to do is I wanted to showcase 3 women that I consider trailblazers out there. They're probably very recognizable to all of you, that I believe showcase not only empathy, but collaboration and vulnerability. Because I want to showcase some of the positive. I want to stay on some of the positive momentum that we're feeling out there and share with you that you don't need to show that teeth. You don't need to show up, with those traditional values that historically we've thought, hey, this is what's going to move us ahead. And, all the things that we're reading in those books about females sabotaging their careers. These are women who are actually embracing what comes natural for them, and they're moving ahead, and they're moving ahead in big ways. So let's start with Kathy. Kathy Engelbert. She is the first female CEO of Deloitte, and being in a business university, many of us are familiar with Deloitte. Many of us don't probably know Kathy's story, but she started right out of college there, so she's a 29-year veteran. So Kathy, like many others that started in public accounting, even me, you embrace this male-dominated industry, and I know it's getting more unequal out there, but they're starting to lose women at the higher ranks. And here's a woman who not only is the CEO of one of the largest consulting firms in the world, but she still makes time to go to her daughter's lacrosse games. But it wasn't always like that. When she first started, she embraced that, that culture, and it's not a 9-to-5 culture. And what happened was, when she first had her child, she came back after 6 weeks. And after she came back, she set the tone, because here's a woman who's succeeding, and the message she sent out to all the other women behind her was, this is what you need to do to get ahead. Have a baby, come back right away. And as she moved up through the leadership ranks, she realized that, hey, we're starting to lose some really great women, and she was sort of on the hunt as to what was happening, and being very collaborative and reaching out and surveying what was going on. She figured out that, hey, you know what, we are not family friendly. We need to embrace more of a family friendly policy, and we need to keep these women, because these are great women with great skill sets. So she made it her mission to change what was going on there. And I'm sure they have work to do, just like every other company, but they have really changed the way women operate within Deloitte. So they've got the most extensive family leave policy in the industry. They've got 16 weeks of paid vacation. And I know many other companies are getting on board with that now. Maybe your company has that too, which is fantastic. But she was one of the early ones to embrace that and make it happen. So the next female I wanted to introduce you to is somebody in our backyard here in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, Helena Folks. So Helena is the president of CVS, and if that's not a great achievement on its own, it's a $140 billion worldwide company. So she's been with the company for 30 years as well. She's the president, and for her, not only does she embrace these collaborative skills and also all of the leadership attributes we talked about earlier, whether it's empathy or vulnerability, but for her, she shows a lot of what makes her authentic, and she puts her authentic persona on the line, and she shares her story. You don't need to be so private, and I think a lot of you are starting to realize that. We see that with some of our top leaders throughout every organization. They're starting to share more of themselves, and Helena is no different. So Helena is a cancer survivor. Her mom is also a lung cancer survivor as well, and she has really incorporated that into her long-term mission. So for her, obviously, tobacco was near and dear to her heart. So here she is, the president of CVS Pharmacy, and they're selling cigarettes. So many of you probably remember a few years back, CVS got rid of all the tobacco products. And when they did this, they really incurred immediately a $2 billion loss in sales. And, that's a hard thing for most companies, especially if you're publicly traded, because you're going out on a limb, right? And you need to really, embrace the shareholders and everyone around you. But she spearheaded that effort to get all the tobacco products out of CVS, and she was able to do that. And that's something that she embraced personally, and she brought that into her professional life. And she put it out there. That was a personal driver for her because of what happened with her mother and herself being a cancer survivor. So when you think about values-based leadership, I think of Helena. And the last one I just wanted to mention, most of you know Cheryl as the CEO of Facebook. And let's face it, Facebook's going through a pretty tough time right now. But Cheryl is at the heart of all of the good things that are happening with Facebook. And she's an author as well. Many of us have that book called Lean In, and she is a true person that is helping women feel more empowered. She's got some great TED Talks out there, great videos, great articles on her. But at the end of the day, when I think of Cheryl, I think of vulnerability. Many people out there probably have heard the story, but here's a woman who had it all. She's got a great family, she had a loving husband, great career, and it all came to a crashing halt when her husband, they were on vacation in Mexico a few years ago. He died of a heart attack, running on a treadmill. He was only 47 years old. And like most women, it comes obviously as quite a shock. How do you deal with that? You're a very public figure, and you probably just want to put your head in the sand and not come out for weeks. She did. She came out right away. And not only did she come out, but she came out in a very vulnerable way. And she shared her pain, and she shared her vulnerability, and she really just put it all out in the line. And I think by doing that, she made connections not only with her employees, but everybody that looked at her as somebody with just a lot of power. And she showed up in a very human way. So when you do that as a leader and you put yourself out there and sharing these private moments, it creates that human element where people are more willing to follow you. That you've got a higher connection to them. So that candor and that vulnerability is really what sets her apart from all the rest. So we are entering into a very powerful movement. We're shining at all levels. I mentioned earlier that we've got, 2018 is such an incredible time for all of us. We've got challenges, but at the end of the day, we need to raise our hand. And, whether you're thinking about the story I shared with you earlier, back in 1978, when, as little girls, we're throwing ourselves in, we're fearless. We need to find that inner voice. We need to find that inner confidence. We need to get back there. And I think that we're doing that. We're getting closer. But in order to do that, you really need to figure out what your unique value is. And part of the She Factor program for me, and what I find most beneficial to the folks that I work with, is helping them identify their strengths. Because some of these strengths, again, might be these hidden values that we're pushing aside and not showing up because they fall under the soft skill umbrella. And when you find these hidden values and you're bringing them to the table in a way that these three women have, it's not going to set you back. It's going to actually propel you forward. Because where the magic happens is really outside of your comfort zone. You think about your comfort zone, and we're all there. There's a place where we feel good, we feel comfortable, and when we take a risk, that's really where it happens. That's where we really need to embrace. So, my advice for all of you is really to get swimming along. Don't fit in. Try to set yourself apart. Try to figure out what makes you authentic. Try to embrace all of those hidden strengths and jump in with both feet. I know we're running short on time. One of the things I did want to mention at the end, Tyler mentioned earlier, is we've got the She Factor program. And the She Factor movement, as I call it, is really a program to help get you more in tune with your natural strengths. It's a program that has been very successful with the companies that I'm working with, and it helps you identify what you're good at, but also gives you the tools and techniques to give you that inner confidence and those communication skills that's going to help you move ahead and have the greatest impact, not only in your career, but in your community and at home. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Tyler, because we may have some questions, and take from there.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Diane. So it looks like we have some comments and a couple questions. If you would like to ask a question, reminder, use the questions feature located on the control panel. We do have some time for some Q&A. So we do have a couple comments. The form, Helena is actually now the CEO of Hudson's Bay, which is the biggest, I think, Canadian department store. So yeah, they got her from CVS.
Oh my goodness.
Another great comment is from Allison, who attends some of our Connecticut events, and she says, "Diane, I was a paper girl in 1978." As, so
That's terrific. That's awesome.
that was a fun comment. And then also back to when you first began your presentation, what are the challenges and barriers for women? We have a comment, of the challenges balancing passion with being seen as emotional. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Sure, it does show up, and what part of the whole strengths-based leadership model is taking what you're good at and not overcompensating. So yeah, passion could be overcompensated, just like communication could be as well. There's so many different things that we can overcompensate when we think of our strengths. For passion, yeah, that can show up in a negative light if you're coming on too strong. There are a number of things that you can do with that. With passion, I think that you can embrace that in everything that you do, but you also have to be careful of not being inserting that in too many places. I think that people's passions could lie outside of work. So you do want to bring that into work. You want to show more of a personal side to you, but you don't want that to take over either and be the center of every single conversation that you're having within your business unit.
Perfect. Thanks, Diane. Hi, Brenda. So we have a question from Brenda. Will the slide deck be sent out? Yes, actually. This recording, the complete recording of Diane's presentation, audio and video, along with the slide deck, will be sent to all of you as attendees. It'll also be archived on our website. So if this is something that you want to share with people at your company, with friends, it will be on alumniconnect.bryant.edu, in addition to the email that you will receive from GoToWebinar. Diane, we have a question from Jessica. She asks, what is your favorite book that you would recommend related to women in business?
Gosh, it's so funny. I just did a program last week and I brought literally like 10 books there. Most of my favorite books are centered on communication. And there's a new one out by Vanessa Van Edwards called Captivate, which is around body language, because body language is a passion of mine. And I think that we send so many messages through how we show up, not through our words, but all our gestures and tone and voice and so forth. So I would start with Captivate, but what I can also do is I can give you a list, Tyler, that we can add to this program as well, because there's too many to list here.
Awesome. Thank you, Diane. And then we just have a lot of great comments from everyone saying that this has been fantastic. They're looking forward to sharing it. So I'm actually going to close us out right now. I do want to remind everyone that we have two upcoming webinars for the younger alumni and members of the Bryant community in the room. It's actually going to be presented by Amica Mutual Insurance. Part one will be on Wednesday, April 18th, and we're calling that Post Bryant Life. And part two will be on Wednesday, May 9th. And that's really everything from your first job to your second job to different insurance benefits to how to manage your 401k, taxes, really the basics that a lot of us don't get in our day-to-day classes when we're students here, and then some helpful tools that really relate to not only current students, but also younger alums, I would say 0 to 10 years out. So if you're interested in either of those, they will be on our website. We're also taking advice and suggestions for our fall webinar series. We do have a couple already in the pipeline, but if you are interested in that, please contact me. You can go to, like I said, alumniconnect.bryant.edu. But yeah, on behalf of all of us at Bryant, I would like to thank Diane for a fantastic presentation and discussion. Most of all, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. You will get a quick survey in your email. Please take a moment to answer that. There's just a couple of questions that really helps us with our webinar series. And a recording of this webinar, like I said, will be on our website. That is alumniconnect.bryant.edu. Diane, thank you so much. And we'll see you soon.
Great, thank you.
All right, goodbye, everyone.